It's finally time for me to review the Retroid Pocket 5, which might just be one of the greatest Android-based retro handhelds ever made. Whether you want to play Android native games, or emulate any system up to PlayStation 2, GameCube, Vita, and 3DS, this might just be the handheld for you. But is it for everyone? Probably not. And we're going to take a look at why. Taking a look at the RP5 right off the bat, it's a classy looking handheld, but in my opinion it does lack a little bit of the character of the Retroid Pocket 4 Pro. It seems like Retroid has kind of moved away from that old retro game style design and are going for a more sleek character. I said in my review of the AYN Odin 2 Portal that I thought that device lacked character, and so did this one. But I think that the Retroid Pocket 5 at least has this kind of dual lower stick face, and the rounded edges that give it just a little bit more shine than the Odin 2 Portal. Something I really love about it right off the bat is that it is extremely small, despite having a 5.5-inch screen. If you take a look when the light is shining on the glass bezel here, you can see the screen underneath. And there's really not a lot of room around it for the controls or anything else. What I'm saying is that you're getting a pretty good screen to body ratio considering the controls. On the left hand side you're going to see the PS Vita style D-pad and the AYN Odin 2 style stick, along with a home button and one of the front facing speakers. Also the select button and this little circle, but I don't really know what that is. On the right hand side you're going to see your start button. You're actually very small, and we'll talk about that in a little bit, ABXY buttons, in a Nintendo layout, your second analog stick, and a second front-firing speaker, and an Android back button. On the top of the device you'll see your stacked shoulder buttons, your volume rocker, and a simple power button. On the bottom you'll find a micro SD card slot, 3.5mm headphone jack, and a USB-C port, which is good for both fast charging, peripherals, and display output. And when it comes to display output, I want to thank the sponsor of this video, Arzopa Z1FC. The Z1FC from Arzopa is a premium portable monitor at an incredible price. It's a 16.1-inch display with a resolution of 1920 by 1080. That's right, full 1080p. Not only that, it has a 144Hz refresh rate and an ultra-fast 13 millisecond response speed. It supports basically any device you can throw at it, thanks to a mini HDMI port on the side and two USB-Cs for both power and video in. It's incredible that you only need one cable to support both power delivery to the screen and the display itself. One of the most shocking things about the Arzopa Z1FC is its weight and its build quality. This thing weighs so little, I was almost worried about it at first. Honestly, it weighs nothing. You could easily throw this in a suitcase or a bag and you are not going to notice the difference if it wasn't there. Another thing I love about it is its all aluminum build. As you can see here, it's really nice and smooth and high quality. Not only that, but it also has an integrated kickstand. You can just kick it up like this. This is truly an all-inclusive portable monitor. Finally, let's talk about HDR, because it is supported on the Z1FC. I'm just going to go into the onboard menu here, go down to miscellaneous, and turn HDR mode on. And as you can see here, the colors just pop out immediately. Seriously, this just looks absolutely amazing. I mean, just look at these black levels, and the contrast with the bright sky. It just looks absolutely amazing. In my opinion, a portable monitor is just an amazing accessory to keep with your retro handheld. A single cable for a bigger screen. If you want to take your retro handheld to a friend's house and play on a big screen, you don't need to carry a bulky power supply or HDMI cables or anything like that. Just a single USB-C cable and you're good to go. And I wouldn't choose any other than the Arzopa Z1FC. The resolution, the brightness, the response time, and the refresh rate are all just absolutely amazing, no matter what game you want to play on it. So big thanks to Arzopa for sponsoring this video. If you're looking for a portable monitor, I would not recommend any other brand for the quality and price. I'll leave links to their products in the description box below. And if you do decide to pick one up and you use one of my links, you'll help to support the channel too. So thanks a lot to them for sponsoring this video. Now back to the Retroid Pocket 5. So anyway, moving around to the back of the Retroid Pocket 5, you can see a massive air intake, the Retroid Pocket 5 embossed logo, this grippy plastic texture on the grips, as well as the air outtake. I like the kind of slightly curved design here as well. Looking at it from the side, you can see these grips are somewhat minimal, but I still think that they look really good, and that they feel pretty good in the hands as well. Before we go any further, let's take a look at this screen. It's a 5.5-inch AMOLED display that honestly just looks absolutely stunning. Second only, I would say, to the AON Odin 2 Portal, but of course that's a 7-inch screen. In terms of a 5.5-inch display on a handheld, I don't think you could find any better than this now or any time in the future. It has bright, vibrant colors colors and perfect inky blacks. No matter what you want to play on the Retroid Pocket 5, it is going to look absolutely stunning thanks to this display. Colors just seem to jump right out of the screen, and the image has a stunning amount of depth thanks to those inky black levels of the OLED technology. The screen has a 1080p resolution, an upgrade from the Retroid Pocket 4 Pro's somewhat 720p display, and I honestly don't have a bad word to say about it. Everything about the screen is absolutely amazing. The size compared to the body, the colors, the blacks, literally everything is just perfect. If you're looking for the best possible screen on a 5.5-inch handheld, this is the one by far. I should also mention that the screen gets incredibly bright. I mean stunningly bright, and also incredibly dim, which is perfect for playing in the dark. The screen does cap out at 60Hz, which for a normie like me is perfectly fine. If you're looking for a higher refresh rate though, I don't think we have it yet on this screen size, and you might want to check out the Odin 2 Portal instead, which has a 120Hz display. In the hands though, the Retroid Pocket 5 has a somewhat strange feeling. Even though the grips look kind of big compared to the size of the device, they're actually very small relative to other devices on the market, and it makes it feel somewhat flat. For me personally, if I'm holding my fingers on the L2 and R2 buttons, which is where I usually rest them, it feels completely fine, whether I'm using the D-pad and face buttons or the analog sticks. But for some people, I can tell that this just isn't going to fit very well in their hands. And in fact, it's one of the biggest complaints I've heard about this device. For some people, it's just not comfortable. But for me, I've never had a problem. In fact, I actually really love how the dual analog sticks are on the bottom here. Not only because it centers this as a retro gaming device with the D-pad and face buttons at the top, but it also has a kind of PlayStation-y feeling, with the dual analog sticks at the bottom. I would definitely concede that holding the device like this for a really long time, I'm talking several hours, can get a little tiring because of the position of the thumbs. But in my type of playstyle where I'm playing for maybe an hour maximum at a time, I think it's perfectly comfortable. When it comes to the D-pad, this is that old school, tried and tested PS Vita style. There's nothing new here, but there doesn't have to be because it's absolutely perfect. I've said it before and I'll say it again. Every time I use a D-pad that isn't this one, that you'll also find on the Odin 2 and a couple of other handhelds, I just wish I was playing on this one again. It's clicky, it's tactile, it's responsive, everything about it is perfect. Never changed this Retroid. When it comes to the face buttons though, it is the first major dislike I have on the Retroid Pocket 5. Now don't get me wrong, this is not a deal breaker whatsoever, but one thing about these buttons is that they are loud. Really loud. And in most cases, I don't think that you're going to notice this. For example, if you're just playing Sonic and you're just running and pressing the A button, you're probably going to be fine. But the second that you start pressing these buttons really fast, there is a very loud plastic on plastic clack that is extremely distracting while you're playing. I just hope that you can hear that because it's really distracting. I probably wouldn't want to be playing Dynasty Warriors or Super Smash Bros. With this face button setup. And I just wish that they had smoothened this out just a little bit to stop that loud plastic on plastic clack. It's not something I've seen before in a handheld, so it's kind of strange. Now I've heard that the Retroid Pocket Mini, which I really don't want to talk about, has an even worse problem than this because you actually have a plastic on glass clack. But even so, the face buttons here are fine, but they are a little bit loud. I do have another complaint about them though, and that is the same complaint that I've had since the Retroid Pocket 3, and that is that these buttons are just way too small and they're spaced way too far apart. They're roughly the size of a Nintendo Switch Joy-Con, but there's a big difference between these and a Joy-Con. Let me show you. So as you can see here, the buttons are more or less the same diameter, but the buttons on the Nintendo Switch are positioned differently. In the X and Y are closer to each other, and A and B are closer to each other. It's kind of like a double stack setup. So if you're pressing just A and B, those two buttons are closer together, and when you need to press both X and Y, those are closer together too. This somehow creates a really comfortable experience to play on. Now I'm not saying the Joy-Con is the best controller ever or anything, but I do think the face buttons are solid. However, when it comes to the RP5, every button that you're going to press on this controller is just a little bit too far away from the others. This really shows itself in a game like Mega Man X, where you need to press the Y and the X button or the Y and the B button together quite often. It's just really hard to do so. Now again, I think that in the vast majority of games you are never going to notice this. And in fact, I feel like Mega Man might be the #1 game where you're going to notice it. But even so, it's just a minor complaint I have. Not enough to ruin the handheld by any means, but just something to be aware of. When it comes to the shoulder buttons, I think they're absolutely great. L1 and R1 are nice and tactile and clicky, much more so than the Odin 2 Portal. And L2 and R2 are fully analog triggers. They have a small amount of travel which I think is appropriate for this handheld, and they're not too wide either. It keeps the whole thing roughly compact, while giving you full controls. And I've had absolutely no problem using these triggers in analog-based games like Rush Rally 3. I do think, however, that they are a little bit stiff and spongy, which means that they can be harder to tap quickly. So if you're playing a first-person shooter game that doesn't auto-fire when you hold down the button, you might have just a little bit of trouble here. But again, this is a minor nitpick in the vast majority of games. So now let's talk about software. And the software here is just a bog standard Android. It's more or less stock Android with no nasty surprises, and a few nice ones. For example, the quick settings menu, which contains toggles between standard, performance, and high performance. Why you wouldn't just leave it on high performance, I don't really know. I don't really think you're going to see a huge difference either way. You can turn the joystick lights on and off, and you can also customize them, or change the color of them. I actually really like this purple. And then you can also change the fan. You can change it between Sport, which is basically maximum, Smart, which will adjust depending on the temperature of the device, or Customize, where you can set an exact amount. I will say that the fan noise on the Retroid Pocket 5 is absolutely dreadful. When it's running full blast, it is a really high-pitched kind of whirring sound, with even like a little bit of a squeak to it, like a whine, and it's not the nicest fan ever. When I have the volume up on my game, or I have earphones in, of course I'm not going to notice it. And honestly, the fan noise is kind of my last consideration when it comes to this device. But it is definitely something that I really dislike about it. I wish that they had just made it sound, I don't know, not awful. You can also change the controller style between Xbox, Retro, and completely off. Just like the Odin 2 Portal, turning the controller off is a really important setting, because when you're connected to your external, portable Arzopa monitor, disconnecting the onboard controls means that they won't be picked up by your game. So player 1 can be your wireless controller. You can also change L2 and R2 mode from analog to digital. The Force Landscape mode is also a welcome feature which lets you force basically any app into landscape. Of course it doesn't always work, and this feature is usually redundant in most cases, especially when it comes to games, but it's still nice to have built in. And the last feature here is the floating icon. With this turned on, when you enter a game, you're going to get a small white line on the right hand side of the screen. Swiping it out will bring up Retroid's overlay, which lets you map controls to the screen, test your inputs, take screenshots, clear your RAM, change the brightness, and stuff like that. It's just a really convenient little thing, although I do wish that you could just turn off the white line but still have this on. I actually asked Retroid to do that a long time ago, but I don't know, I guess I never did. Other than that, the software here is just bog standard. There's nothing to get in your way in terms of regular Android. So you can go ahead and set up any launcher that you want, whether it's Emulation Station, Daigisho, or just this normal stock Android launcher like I do. I believe this is Quick Step like most random devices have. There's also the Retroid launcher, which has had some pretty significant upgrades compared to the old version. Sorry, did I say upgrades? I just meant updates, to be honest. Now, I haven't set this up myself because I tend to just stick with stock Android, but this does give you a nice built-in way to manage your game library, and it has some pretty nifty features like automatically collecting box art and stuff like that. I'm sure there are some tutorials and guides that will show you what this looks like when it's fully set up, and I recommend going to take a look at those if it's something you're interested in. I do appreciate Retroid putting actual time and effort into their launcher, and if it's anything like it used to be on the Retroid Pocket 2 Plus, yeah, the 2 Plus, then it's probably pretty good. Anyway, that's it for software. Let's talk about playing games on the Retroid Pocket 5. Right away, when playing retro games on the Retroid Pocket 5, especially ones that don't fill out all of the screen, you're going to see the benefit of this all-glass front. By the way, I forgot to mention it earlier, but I don't really like these all-glass fronts because they get really smeary and dirty really easily. But they do come with this amazing benefit that the screen just blends in with the glass, at least on the black version. For example, here it is with the screen completely off, and unless I rotate it exactly into the light, you really can't see the screen head on. But then when you turn it on, boom, it's right there in the middle. It looks really, really great. Anyway, when you're playing retro games, because of that OLED black level, and the way that it seamlessly transitions into the black glass of the device, you actually are given the impression that your game screen is the size of the display itself. There's no ugly side-lit blue bars or anything like that. And letterboxing just doesn't have as much of an impact. And that's whether you're playing retro games with a 4:3 aspect ratio, 3:2, or anything else. Everything just looks absolutely amazing. And that even expands to when you're playing full screen games too, because there's still a completely seamless transition from the screen to the glass. It's really good. Because the D-pad is up top here, it gives it a very retro feeling, almost like it was catered to serving retro games. And because of this absolutely fantastic PS Vita style D-pad, retro games are just a joy to play, whether they're fast platformers, fighting games, or whatever else. If you need precise inputs on the D-pad, you've got them here. It's absolutely flawless, I can't say it enough. I've already talked about the downside of the face buttons, but for general use and in general retro gaming, they feel just fine. Now when it comes to more modern games, it's when things get a little bit more interesting. Some people aren't going to like the dual analog sticks on the bottom, and that's okay. I personally really like it. I play a lot of Combat Master, which is an FPS that you can download for free on Android, and I found the controls and the analog sticks to be perfectly responsive and effectively deadly in-game. When it comes to performance, everything retro is going to play on this just fine. We're talking from your 2D systems all the way up to and including Dreamcast and PSP, are all going to play upscaled to 1080p with absolutely no issues whatsoever. Perhaps there's the odd outlier that might not do 1080p, but 720 will do just fine. And on this size of screen, there's not much difference anyway. When it comes to GameCube, more or less everything is going to be conquered on the RP5. The Snapdragon 865 chip here is more than powerful enough to play your high-end systems, usually with upscaling to 1080p or again at least 720. I haven't encountered a single GameCube game that doesn't run pretty much perfect on this handheld. And at this size, I think that's just awesome. I used to think that the T618 was like a really impressive performer, and it's just incredible that we're getting this amount of performance these days at this price. The Snapdragon 865 is a really amazing choice here. PlayStation 2 is also really good on this handheld. However, we are definitely still limited by the immature nature of the Aether SX2 or Nether SX2 apps. But still, anything that would usually work on PS2 on Android is going to work just fine here. And the same can be said for Android gaming too. Pretty much everything is going to work perfectly. Maybe not at the ultimate highest settings in a game like Genshin Impact or something, but for the most part everything runs and runs well. I highly doubt you're going to find an Android game that's unplayable on this handheld. Well, unless it's a Square Enix classic RPG that they haven't added controller support to for goodness knows what reason. I touched on it briefly when I spoke about Arzopa earlier, but I really love the video output on the USB-C port on the RP5. It's a really flawless experience in which you only need one cable to connect to an external monitor. Just a USB-C cable that carries video. And that means that this is a very dockable handheld. You can buy the Retroid Pocket dock, or if you already have an AOAN dock, you can use that as well. And everything works as you expect. Of course, you can also buy any number of generic docks on Amazon, but you only really need that if you want extra peripherals like controller dongles, mouse and keyboard, and stuff like that. But for the most part, the video output works really well, and I just love these handhelds that double as a home console. And when they're this powerful, it's a really enjoyable experience. Finally, let's talk about the speakers and the battery life. The speakers on the Retroid Pocket 5 are a substantial improvement to those that were found on the Retroid Pocket 4 Pro, because they're front-facing and not downward-facing. Retroid has struggled with audio quality for so long, but I'm glad to say that it's fixed on the RP5. Sound is crystal clear and just generally pretty good. I'm not going to say it's going to be award-winning Harman Kardon audio or anything like that, but for the most part, if you like playing your game audio out loud, it works perfectly well. Also, when I recorded that segment just now, I didn't realize just how loud the speakers get. They get really loud, which is great to see, or hear. Finally, let's talk about battery life, and it's honestly not a consideration on the RP5. You're going to get several hours of battery life even under heavy load, thanks to the 5000 mAh battery, and what seems to be some pretty good software optimization. I would say you're easily going to get your standard gaming session out of this device. Maybe like 4 or 5 hours if you're playing GameCube or something like that. And then when all is said and done, this thing charges extremely quickly thanks to its quick charge capabilities. You can plug this thing in for 30 minutes and you're going to be good to play for another couple of hours. It's just awesome. So that's the Retroid Pocket 5 in a nutshell. In the end, I don't have an awful lot of complaints about the device, but I definitely wouldn't say it's perfect either. My biggest complaint is going to be these face buttons. They are too loud in too many situations. But of course that's subjective. But also I think that they're a little bit too small and a little bit too far apart. I really think that Retroid should take a cue from Nintendo and move a few of these buttons closer together to just give it a more coherent feeling. But outside of that, you have basically the best display in class, fantastic controls overall, good speakers, great battery life, and everything you would expect from a premium retro handheld. Now for some people, this is not going to be comfortable. And I'm saying that because I've read many reports of people who just do not find this device comfortable and just can't really play it. So really there's no good solution to that unless you've got a friend who already has one that you can try out. For me, it's not a problem, but as of right now there's no grip, or at least no official grip or anything like this available. So just be aware if you're thinking about buying one of these, that might be a consideration. I would say if you've got bigger hands, it's probably going to be more of an issue. But for me, it feels great in all situations. So shout out to Retroid for making one of the greatest retro handhelds of all time. that works for pretty much everything, looks great, and only leaves minor improvements for future iterations, at least in my opinion. In fact, where do we even go from here? That's my question.